Saptamsa Deities. The first Saptamsa is Shara. Shara is any corrosive liquid, whether it has saline in it and therefore it corrodes, whether it's alkaline and therefore it corrodes, or whether it's acidic and therefore corrodes. Represents any kind of corrosive liquid. And a key thing in this Varga is that all the deities are liquids. They're all in liquid form. The juices have to be flowing, right? For sexual intercourse, moisture and liquids, it's all about that, right? Things have to flow. And flowing and liquid is part of creation. Just like on Earth, water has to move around for life on Earth to happen, for life to be generated and created. The creative, or it's the water element who's responsible for generation, generating things and growing things and creating things. So all the deities of this Varga are liquids, okay? So Shara is the only deity that's a liquid that you wouldn't want to have to eat. It's a corrosive liquid. It'll poison you to eat it. It's a bad thing. And that's the first Saptamsa in an odd sign. Now, in an even sign, the deities are in reverse. Okay, meaning the first Saptamsa of an even sign is ruled by the Shuddha Jala, which is the last Saptamsa in an odd sign. And the last Saptamsa of an even sign is Shara. So the first of an even, of an odd, and the seventh of an even. So this is even over here, this is first. The first of an odd and the seventh Saptamsa of an even sign is the Shara, or corrosive liquid Saptamsa. It's not a good Saptamsa to have. Now, when we think about it, the Saptamsa is all about the seventh house. It's about sharing and embracing. The first is always you alone, isolated, right? It's you, without anything but you. And the whole purpose of the Saptamsa is to get in touch with things that are either catalyst or which are required in order to create. And you can't do that all by yourself. So this first Saptamsa represents creative energy that doesn't have a full outlet. Okay? Because it doesn't have a full outlet, the creative juices become corrosive and poisoning and sickening. It reminds me of that book Shogun. Remember that? It was an epic movie they made in the 70s. It was a really good historical novel from Japan with a lot of Japanese culture. And the European was shocked when the Japanese were insisting that he have a concubine. He's like, no, that's not right. And you know, the Japanese are just going, how do you stay healthy? Like, dude, how do you stay healthy if you don't have sexual intercourse? And what they're saying is, if the sexual energy or any creative energy gets bottled up and can't be shared and released, it poisons the body, it poisons the mind. If you get an Ayurvedic text, it'll give you a list of diseases that are a result of pent-up sexual energy. Okay? So, that first Saptamsa of an odd sign and the seventh of an even is that pent-up creative energy that becomes caustic because it can't get out. If a person's trying to create a dynasty that's not having to do with just children and procreation, they're frustrated because their dynasty won't sink the roots they want in the world. The public isn't embracing it fully. If their dynasty is more about creation and procreation, they're frustrated and pent out because they're not having an outlet in a sexual partner to release that sexual energy so that sexual energy can take a life of its own and create. Okay? So this is a troubled one. Okay? And this restricts and limits the creative potential of any planet that's found in this Shara Saptamsa. Okay? All the other ones are for more or less great. Okay? The next Saptamsa, the second Saptamsa of an odd sign, or the sixth Saptamsa of an even sign, is Shira. Shira is milk. It's any kind of milk, okay? And milk is, a very nurturing food, but it's not a high energy food in the sense of some of these other foods that we're going to talk about in a minute, okay? Such as sugar cane juice or honey. Those things just hype you up. Milk is like this. It's nice and smooth nourishment that you don't drink it and get all hyper, right? In fact, milk relaxes you. Milk helps you go to sleep. It makes you feel content. So the Shira is this very contented creative energy. Okay? It's a content, available, and ready. It's ready to nourish. It's not intent on creating. It's not looking around to create, It's not frustrated with not being able to create like Shira is. It's just very content and ready and able and willing when the creative potential arises in their life, when the partner's there, when the public's ready. So this gives this nice quality of nourishing one's creative energy, conserving one's creative energy in a peaceful way, and being ready and available. That planet's ready and available to really be created with when the opportunity arises. But when the opportunity is not there, it's very much at a state of peace and nourishment. Okay? So the Shira is not a super hyper creative Saptamsa. It's not full of energy, it just has to create or it's going to explode or anything like that. It has all the creative potential it needs to create something beautiful, but it needs to be instigated first. Okay? How you can kind of look at these, the Shara Saptamsa is like an unhealthy man. It's just full of pent-up sexual juices, okay? Who's, sexually frustrated even. The Shira is like a woman that's totally just ready for the right man when he shows up to embrace him and have the great family life, okay? And to produce, but is not, looking around, spending all their time on Match.com trying to find Mr. Right, okay? They're at peace, okay? And remember what I said, this planetary arrangement that they give to, that Yvonne Japika tried to create by skipping those signs, which I didn't find really worked well. What I actually found worked better is just do what's really logical. The Shara Saptamsas are ruled by the sun. And they do have a solar nature. They're really strongly creative, but they're frustrated with their creation. They're not able to embrace somebody else and create with them. Okay? That's what the sun is like, right? Go try to embrace the sun. It's the only planet we'll never land on, right? We're never going to embrace the sun. We can land on any other planet, fall on the ground and kiss that planet, embrace that planet, and say, I'm so glad I'm here on Mars, right? We could even do that to Jupiter and Saturn more than we can do it to the sun. We're never going to embrace the sun. The sun, as always, shines brightly, full of energy, but is alone and isolated. Okay? The sun is no happier than is really Saturn. We always think Saturn's depressed, unhappy. Well, the truth is the sun has just as many reasons to be unhappy. But the difference is the sun is able to shine with his own light and find fulfillment in that, where Saturn doesn't have his own light to shine with. So Saturn, in the end, probably does suffer more. But it's lonely at the top. The hyper-creativity that this Saptamsa can give is not going to be met by intelligences and understandings and embraced sufficiently for this first Drekana. Okay, it's like this light can't be fully embraced. It's too bright, it's too painful for others to embrace or for the public to embrace. And so this becomes a frustrated Saptamsa. People with strongly dignified planets in this Saptamsa can have a really powerful creative energy, a lot of creative intelligence, but their intelligence just may be so bright that nobody else gets it, for instance. So they're the eccentric genius that everyone thinks is a wacko, for instance. Okay? And of course, then they'll be frustrated, and this caustic stuff will build up in their systems and their minds and emotions unless they find another way to release it. But the Shira Saptamsa is the moon. It's ready and waiting. It's just waiting for the right light to shine on it, and then it's going to shine beautifully and create. Okay, and create growth. It's a really nice one. People with this kind of creative energy are really enjoyable people to be with, and they're just really great to be productive with, because they have a high capacity for that. Saptamsa of an odd sign, and the fifth Saptamsa of an even sign is Dadya. Okay? Now Dadya, we're just going to go to the next planet, is I look at as being more Mars quality. And I'm associating this with the planets just to help you sort of understand the natures of these things. So Dadya, what is Dadya? Well, it's coagulated milk or thick sour milk. It's milk that's kind of soured and gotten thick. It's still a liquid. It's not cheese. Yogurt is also a Dadya. So I look at it as yogurt, something that's full of vital energy and health. So, but the important thing about thick soured milk or yogurt is it's been catalyzed. It's been transformed. It's been changed. It's gone through something that's made it into a different stage. So it's not like we have milk, and that, which is, Shira is milk, right? Which is a naturally pure substance. Dadya is something that's been changed. And of course, Mars is the fire that burns things and changes things. Mars is the alchemist, who mixes chemicals and catalysts. Mars rules catalysts and things like that. Epoxy glue is ruled by Mars, things like that. So, this Dadya, yogurt, or thick soured milk, or buttermilk, is anything like that. Anything that's been, transformed slightly from its substance. And this thing has a sour taste to it. It's not the most pleasant tasting thing by itself. You can make yogurt too sour. Sour milk is too sour. We want to have it at the right stage where it's still sweet enough to be nourishing. But Dadya represents a substance that's full of vital energy, as it like Shira, like milk is, that's been subtly transformed into a different stage. Okay? And that's what these Saptamsa, planets in these Saptamsas are really good at. They're able to take something that's good and transform it into something else that's useful, especially when there's a problem that needs to be solved. Why would we want to change milk? Milk is this great substance with all this nourishment in it. Why would we change it? Because a person is maybe lactose intolerant, right? They have a weakness or a sickness. And so, by turning that milk into yogurt, all of a sudden they can eat it without the problem of the lactose intolerance. Or maybe they have weak digestion, they just don't feel good on milk. But then they can eat yogurt much more effectively. And we all know yogurt is much more easy to digest and process than milk, right? So, when we hit a problem or we hit a snag, we have to change our creative energy in order to make it work, to make it a useful thing. So third Saptamsa creative energy, the Dadya, or the fifth of an even sign, the Dadya Saptamsas are about transforming that which we're creating as a result of some problem, or to make something better, or to fix something. All these things are the nature of Mars, the big fixer. Okay? So, people who are able to create wondrous things that help humanity with its problems, with medical problems, etc., are bound to have strong planets in the Dadya Saptamsas. Okay? People who encounter some problems maybe with having children, and maybe who have to, do some things to help having children, whether going on a special medical program or anything, requiring extra energy and effort to bring the creative juices past that weakness and be able to create, would be Dadya Saptamsas. So people working in fertility clinics are going to find lots of people with planets that have some affliction to them, and those planets will be in Dadya. But because they're in Dadya, they can work their way around it. Whereas another person may have the same infertility problem and be due to an affliction, but they don't care to work around it. They're just settled in it. Like the Shira person is going to be settled with it. The Dadya person is always going to fight to bring their creative energy to some realization. Okay? And then in respect to the public, someone who's trying to create a dynasty that is embraced by the public, the Dadya Saptamsa would be someone who, when they encounter a problem with how the public receives them or whatever, they'll adjust in accordance with what will make the project take off. So changing something good to get around obstacles or problems is basically what the Dadya Saptamsa is all about, so that the creative vision can be realized, whether that's for a child or something other. Okay? The fourth Saptamsa of an even sign, and the fourth of an odd, and also the fourth of an even, is Ajya. Ajya. Okay? Now, all the available books on Brihat Parashar, available translations, don't use this word Ajya. That's what Parashar calls it. They call it Grita, which means ghee. Ajya means ghee too. It's ghee or melted butter. And the key word here is melted ghee or melted butter. It's not hard ghee and it's not hard butter. It's melted. Again, all these deities are in a liquid state. They don't count if they're in a solid state. So melted butter or melted ghee is this fourth Saptamsa. Now, this is in lots of ways the best Saptamsa. It's the middle Saptamsa. Planets in this Saptamsa are going to be right in the middle of a sign. And one thing we know is that planets in the middle of the sign have the most capacity to produce, the most capacity to create. Planets in the Ajya, Saptamsa have the most energy to produce. Not in an explosive, boom, get done way, but in a long-term consistency of effort, long-term way. Because ghee is so high in nourishment. It has the most energy, right? Ghee, which is fat, has 8 calories per gram, right? Lots of energy in there. And the energy in these food substances symbolizes the creative juice. But it's slow burning, right? Fat's slow burning. So this fourth Saptamsa is creative energy that's steady and strong, consistent over the years. People who have children over a 20-year period of life, one every 4 years, or 10 one every 2 years. These people who have these children over this long-term span, that's Ajya Saptamsa. People who create great things that the public embraces over a long period of time, and things which endure and have a lot of staying power, is Ajya, Saptamsa. Imagine yourself going on a walk. You're going to walk as far as you can. And if you're eating ghee, you'll be sustained longer than if you're eating sugar, okay, over the long haul. Well, not eating it. Let's restate it another way. If you're full of sugar, which means your liver has full glycogen reserves, you can last on that sugar, well, average person 40 minutes, but if you're well trained, you can last on that sugar 3 hours, maybe even 4, okay? But after that, you're stuck to burning fat, which is ghee. So if you're going to walk all day long, you're relying on ghee, right? On fat, not sugar, which are some of the later Saptamsas. So this middlemost Saptamsa is long, sustained, creative energy that can burn for a very long time, and as a result, create a very vast John Lennon's Jupiter, the most important planet in this Varga, happens to be not surprisingly, is in the Ajya Saptamsa, which I found oftentimes creates the longest lasting dynasties, more so than any other Saptamsa. Okay? So, and of course, of all these substances we talk about, the most worshipped substance is ghee. Ghee is one of these substances that they pour regularly into the fire during the religious rites, right? And of course it's melted. They don't just throw a stick of butter in there. They melt it and pour it in. So this is sort of the most respected Saptamsa in the context of the substance. And the reason is because that substance has the most vitality to it. It has 8 calories per gram. Okay, twice as much as any of the other substances have. Okay? Alright, the fifth Saptamsa of an odd sign and the third Saptamsa of an even sign is Ikshu Rasa, which is sugar cane juice. Okay? Now, sugar cane juice is wonderful stuff. Most people in the West have never had it. But if you go to India and you don't mind little flies in your juice, they'll press it on the side of the street. They just take these sugar stalks, they run it through the press, maybe run a lemon through with it, and you drink it, and you feel like Superman. It just vitalizes you totally. It's kind of like you having a big glass of fresh carrot juice, but twice as potent, okay? And you don't come off it. You don't, a half hour later all of a sudden bonk and can't think or can't move. It's actually really healthy. Sugarcane juice is a really healthy substance that's full of sugar, right? It gets into your blood right away. You can also look at Iksha Rasa as any type of juice, from carrot juice, apple juice, orange juice, any of these juices, the extracts from the sap that are not a milk, but are sweet and invigorating, as Iksha Rasa. They say Iksha Rasa because probably that was the only juice they used to, extract, sugar cane back then. Sugar cane juice has been around a very long time. They didn't have apples in India and so on. So the sweetest, most vitalizing juice was this. They weren't juicing carrots, 1,000 years ago, okay? But nowadays, we could say carrot juice, apple juice, sugarcane juice. In our culture, it's more carrot juice and apple juice, because we don't really have sugarcane juice, unfortunately. But basically, it's a fluid form of vitalizing sugar, okay? Like having a big glass of carrot juice, for instance, okay? Or a big glass of sugarcane juice that's not processed, just sugarcane sap, basically. Unrefined maple syrup would qualify, if you could get it, but you can't get it. So it's a sweet liquid substance that's a thin liquid full of sugar that hypes you up, energizes you right away, but not for a long time. That's what the Saptamsa is like. It's really highly hyper-creative energy, but it doesn't have the staying power of the Ajya Saptamsa. But it's louder at first, okay? So people with their creative planets in this Iksha Rasa Saptamsa are more likely to have lots of children in a short time and no children ever after that, as compared to the Ajya, which have children over a long period of time, perhaps. So this one has a lot more bang, but for a shorter period of time. And the creative energy can kind of go anywhere. There's just a desire to create, and there's this energy to create, hyper-creative energy. But it doesn't have to latch onto any one thing, okay? Or even any one person, it's just hyper-creative energy, full of creative passion, that wants to be used and wants to be creative. So hyper-creative, but not super focused, okay? And this is the most strongly procreative Saptamsa, okay? Oops, and it's ruled by Jupiter, okay? I forgot to talk about this one being ruled by Mercury over here, but we'll get back to that. So this fifth of an odd, third of an even is ruled by Jupiter, which is the planet of the Saptamsa and the creative planet. And Jupiter, of course, rules sweet taste and sugar. And this is the most sweetest, invigorating, from a sugar point of view, substance you can have on this list, the Iksha Rasa. So it's this really hyper-creative energy, but something that's not going to last as long. And that's what creating children is all about, right? It's a 5-minute miracle, right? It's not like creating a child takes years and years and years of work and turmoil in the bedroom, right? It's a 5-minute miracle. And that's all you need to do is be hyped up on sugar for 5 minutes and you can create a child, symbolically speaking. And even in creating something wonderful in the world, it just takes that one spark of brilliance to create something wonderful and unique, right? You get this one perfect insight to write the perfect song, okay? And that's what think about it, that's what most musicians do, right? They write one great song and all the other songs suck, right? Or the rest of their songs all sound the same. They're just like, they had this one huge creative inspiration that was amazing. It was so amazing that it kept all their other songs afloat. None of their other songs could have made it. The typical musician I'm talking about. That's what Iksha Rasa is right. It can have this brilliant insight. It only takes 5 minutes, but it doesn't have the consistency of time after time after time. Compare that to the Beatles, who've got lots of Ajya, John Lennon's chart, who's created so many songs, all of them so good. There's, a surprising amount of good songs that all have more variety to them. And of course, variety is a quality of Mercury, which rules the Ajya Saptamsa. So, the most powerfully creative energy is this Ikshurasa, the most hyped up, hyper creative. But it's not always the most successful because it doesn't actually have the staying power of the Ajya Saptamsa, which tends to be the most successful and to have the most children, and really in lots of ways the healthiest children, because it can march them out over a longer period of time. Whereas the Ikshurasa is more inclined to have a boom of creative energy, and then after that, they're just tumbling along exhausted because they created too much to handle at first. They got 4 kids in 3 years, let's say, and then they're stumbling through the next 15 years of their life, versus a person who has one every 3 or 4 years and sustains a more steady flow, and as a result, everyone's a lot more happy at the end of 15 years. So, but it all depends on your faith. So that's kind of the quality of this Ikshurasa. Very hyper-creative, very sudden, full of energy, but the energy doesn't have the staying power, and usually things are created more in a short flash of time, relatively speaking. But like I said, that's what creativity is. Creativity is you get that boom, that flash insight of Jupiter. So usually you'll find the Ikshurasa capable of a higher degree of brilliance when it does create. But it won't necessarily create over as long-term as a period as the Ajya Saptamsa will. Okay? But I'm just talking about differences. I'm not saying this one's better or worse. I'm just talking about differences. They're all nice, except for the Shara, which can cause some problems. Okay? Then the 6th Saptamsa of an even sign, and the 6th Saptamsa of an odd sign, and the 2nd Saptamsa of an even sign is the Madhu. Madhu, which means honey. Now, honey we know is sweet, but it's not as sweet as sugarcane juice. Okay? Honey has other flavors as well, but the biggest difference between honey and sugarcane juice is honey's sticky, right? Okay? Now, before I talk about honey and its sticky property, one thing I want to mention is that in the Vedas it says that the juice of plants, milk, ghee, and honey have virya. These are the foods we can eat that have vital energy, the energy that rebuilds and regenerates our body, that recreates our cells. And that's why these are the substances used here. We've got milk, ghee, which is a product of milk, juice of plants, milk, ghee, juice of plants, and honey. Then we have dadya, which is another form of milk, of vitality, that can be taken on by those who have problems, right? You can eat the yogurt even though you can't eat the milk, okay? Then we have honey here. And honey is ruled, or this Madhu Saptamsa has a Venus connotation. I'm not saying ruled. I'm just putting the planet here to help you sort of understand the quality. So Venus is different from Jupiter in the sense that Jupiter is hyper-creative, wants to procreate, okay? Jupiter's like the stud bull who can just sit there and procreate all day long. Do his 5-minute creative miracle, sleep a day, wake up the next day, do another 5-minute creative miracle with another cow. And that's the hyper-creative energy of the sugarcane juice. But honey's different. Honey's thicker. Okay, it doesn't get spread as thin. And it sticks to something, right? But it's equally invigorating. It's also not as invigorating. It does digest slower, actually. But it's also invigorating. So this Madhu Saptamsa has the creative energy still, but it's usually a little more focused on exactly what it wants. It's not creativity for the sake of creativity. It's creativity to create something it really wants or really values. Okay? And that makes it more focused. It sticks to things a little more, just like honey does. It also inclines it to be a little more devotionally centered in their sexual relationships. Okay? Again, they're a little more stuck to the person they're with. Whereas the Ikshurasa, like I said, is more like the bull with a bunch of cows. The Madhu is more like wolves, okay, whose creative energy merges with one person and sticks with that and try to create more in a partnership, because that's what Venus rules. The Ikshurasa is more creative because it creates simply for the purpose of creation, which is what Jupiter is about. Just letting Jupiter create the life it wants and not worry about how it's created or who it's created with as much. Okay, but letting the life take on its own nature. And that's in lots of ways, that's the greatest wisdom, right? Creating when there's the opportunity to create. That's what sustains life. Animals do that, right, for the most part. Dogs don't, find themselves a bitch in heat and say, I really want a dog without spots, and walk away, right? Dogs get stung with that creative urge, and they go on to create. And that creative energy takes on a life as another baby, which goes around the world doing what it does as a little doggy, until one day it creates. So it's just this creation for the sake of creation, because that's what's happening in the world. And that may sound unspiritual in a way, but if you think about it, Jupiter, that's just how Jupiter operates on a creative level. He's there to create. Venus is the one who wants to create with a specific purpose more. And that can narrow creation. That can narrow what's created. It can reduce what's created. So it's not like one is better or worse. Venus is going to try to create something of greater value, of greater intrinsic value or something. But Jupiter is just going to create and let the creation take its own course. Venus is going to create because it wants it, and it wants to dictate what it's creating more. It has an agenda more. And what's wiser in life, to have an agenda or to not have an agenda? Well, we can make an argument for Jupiter's wisdom of letting the life decide the life, the creative energy decide the life, not the creator of it determining it. And that's what Jupiter does. This Ikshurasa Saptamsa is more about creating and letting the creation take its own course, rather than deciding this is what I decided to create. Okay? Venus does that more. And so the Jupiter, the Ikshurasa, the fifth Saptamsa, in general is going to be happy with what it creates, because it just loves seeing the life of their creation. So the Ikshurasa is like the guy who has 10 kids and they're all running around half naked and driving chaos, and half of them are flunking school, and the other half, are who knows what else. And he just enjoys all of his kids. He just thinks they're all beautiful and lovely. He just is enjoying the life around him. That's Jupiter. Venus is the one who says, I want 2.5 kids, but not until I have a white fence to keep them safe and enough money to buy them proper clothing. Okay? That limits life on Earth. Jupiter's not about that when it comes to creative. Jupiter's just going to create as much as it can. And that's how Jupiter is. And lots of times we don't want to think of Jupiter as doing anything that seems irrational or reckless. But in this letting life go, it's basically saying a person trusts in life. And that's really a high wisdom, because trust in life is trusting in God, and that's what Jupiter's all about. And astronomically, Jupiter, due to his huge gravitational influence, actually causes the sun to rotate around the spot in space. So we don't really rotate around the sun. We rotate along with the sun around a point in space called the barycenter. And because of Jupiter's mass, he actually pulls the sun around this little point. And it takes the sun just under 12 years, the length of Jupiter's rotation around the sun, to go around this little barycenter point. So Jupiter himself is sort of moving and creating this whole universe along with the sun. He's actually moving the sun around. That's how much creative energy Jupiter has. And Jupiter trusts that what he creates is going to live and do what it's meant to. He's going to trust in God more than himself. And that's why Jupiter is considered the great philosopher. He trusts in God, not himself. Jupiter does not teach, right? According to Jamie, Jupiter is the wisest. But Navagni, he does not speak. Okay? Why doesn't he speak? Because he knows that life, God is going to take care of things the way they're meant to. Venus, on the other hand, is also a Brahmin, as is Jupiter. But he's a teacher. He teaches. He talks. He tells people what to do. Okay? He believes in people. That people can be educated and learn to do something better. And he'll try to strive for a high education. That's what Venus is like. Venus trusts in humans and human intelligence and humans' abilities and tries to prepare humans to have a good life. Jupiter trusts in life. Okay? And we can't just say, well, I'm going to be Jupiter or I'm going to be Venus and throw a planet out the window, right? We have to have all 7 planets. A healthy life is where we trust in life, we trust in Jupiter, God, but we also trust in our knowledge and our education to do something and to make things happen in a way that we deem worthwhile, which is Venus. So we need to work with both planets, obviously. So I'm talking about differences, not saying one's better than the other. But the Venetian creative influence is just not as strong as the Jupiter or Ikshirasa creative influence because it's thicker, it's more regulated, okay? It sticks to things more and it has more of an agenda. And that limits what will be created. Now that can be really good too, right? It's like we do need to limit in this world of limited resources, of limited space, unlimited incomes to feed our kids. We can't just go out and be irresponsible and everyone have 20 kids who we can't afford to clothe, right? And who are all sleeping in one bed. So, we can't go to those extremes. We need Venus to be educated and sensible to make sure it's all worthwhile at the end, okay? So I'm just talking about the differences in how these two create. The Ikshirasa is hyper-creative, creates for the sake of creation, and trust in life to take care of the creation. The Madhu creates along a more focused line, try to create what it wants and wants to stick with its creation and nurture it more, okay, and baby it more, and educate it more, okay? All right, then the last Saptamsa is the Shuddha Jala. So Shuddha Jala means pure water. Okay, now pure water, of course, is very vitalizing in itself. And it's not vitalizing in the sense of one of these foods that gives us all this energy to do stuff, right? When we drink a big old jug of water, we don't get all hyper and start bouncing off the ceilings the way we do when we have a big old glass of carrot juice, right? You don't just wake up for a few hours. What does having a big old jug of water, fresh water, do? It fulfills you, right? It refreshes you. It makes you feel good after all the hard creative work, right? So, the Shuddha Jala, which is the 7th of an odd and 1st of an even, and which has Saturnian connotations, is pure water. So this is not any hyper or powerful creative energy. It's a very relaxed, contented creative energy. It's the creative energy that's already expunged its creative needs and just is happy to be refreshed with what it has created. So this is not a strong Saptamsa for creating a dynasty. It's not a strong Saptamsa for creating children. It's a strong Saptamsa for being refreshed by life, by feeling refreshed by what after one has created, like, doing all that hard creative work and being, having burned all your sugar and all your honey and all your ghee, and you just want to relax and be refreshed. You want to rest and be refreshed with pure water. You drink the pure water and you're content, you're fulfilled, you've done what you meant to. That's the quality of this Shuddha Jala. It's a refreshing one after the hard work, okay? It's more about taking refreshment in what one's created and enjoyment in what one's created rather than it is in doing anything with the creation or creating it anymore. And what is it to be refreshed or contented? What does that require? Detachment, right? Which is Saturn. It's creating the children and finally letting the children, finish raising the children, being done with the children, and letting the kids run out and live their lives without being their puppeteer or without telling them what they need to do, just letting them live their lives. It's when you create the music you create, and you let people critic it and think of it the way they want, and create songs based on your music the way they want, make videos with your music the way they want. You just enjoy watching your creating from a state of refreshment, from a state of, I'm done with this, I'm refreshing, I'm retired, and I'm enjoying myself, and I'm detached from my creation now. Okay? Sexually speaking, this Shuddha Jala is like having sex. During that sex, there's only the one thing you can think about, and that's having that sex. Finally, you burn all your sugar and all your ghee out, and you roll over, and all you want is a big glass of water. And at that moment, you have a complete state of peace and detachment, right? That's the Shuddha Jala, okay? That's the nature of the Saptamsa. It doesn't have the need to create anymore. It doesn't have the need to mingle in its creations anymore. It just is satisfied and content that it did create, and it just has a state of refreshment over knowing it has done something, okay? And afflicted planets in the Shuddha Jala, Saptamsa, represent things that we've created that we can't let go of, that we're always thinking we need to be in control of, or we can't find a satisfaction in. They don't refresh us. You know, it's like when you create your children, you're done with your children, and they just do something that makes you happy, and you just get this feeling of refreshment. You're tired, and they do something, you just get happy. That's the Shuddha Jala. You know, it's being refreshed by that which you've created, which makes it all worthwhile. But if the planets are afflicted in the Shuddha Jala, Saptamsa, then the person can't let go of those things or can't find peace in those things and doesn't find refreshment in those things. And then they can really have a lot of problems with those things, as you'd guess, as it being a Saturn-orientated Saptamsa. So detachment is important. Letting go of your creation. You've done the creative work, and all you can do is sit back and enjoy and watch what you've created and rest. That's the Shuddha Jala Saptamsa. Okay? So this is that sort of whole creative process. And we can look at this as a step-by-step thing. First, we'll just look at it sexually, because this is a very sexual Varga, and because we can apply sexual symbology to everything we do. Shara is just a man that's full of testosterone, 21 years old or whatever, 19 something, just full of testosterone, in his peak health because he's eating at McDonald's and his health is going to be bad by the time he's 25, full of vital energy, ready to make love, have sex with anything that moves, right? In a more idealistic, not idealistic, but a more mental realm, this is someone who's just full of creative ideas. Their ideas are just blowing up in their head, okay? The second, the Shira Saptamsa, is when the testosterone-filled man finds a willing partner, finds a woman who likes him and who's going to embrace him. Or, for the guy who's got this mentally creative energy, it's when he puts it on paper. He gets it on paper, and it starts coming into some substance. The ideas in his head are meaningless, right? In this Saptamsa, he starts putting it on paper. The musician hears the music in his head, and now he writes the musical notes down in this Saptamsa over here. Okay? Then in the third Saptamsa, this is the transformation of the creative juices. Okay? Things have to somehow be transformed or changed. In the sexual act, this is sort of like you can almost say, you can relate that as the conception. Okay? Where there's a transference of substances that creates, is a catalyst for something to happen. So this is like the ejaculation in the sexual act, okay? In fact, people who have planets in the, sexually centered planets in Dadya Saptamsa that are afflicted can suffer from premature ejaculation, or can suffer from ejaculation that doesn't have enough semen to, weak ejaculation, so they can't impregnate anyone, okay? But it's that act. In the musician, it's when the person tries playing the music and revises it because it doesn't sound quite right. It was in their head, they wrote it on paper, now they strum it on their guitar, and it doesn't sound quite right, so they need to revise it and shift it and fix it, basically. And the guy who's wrote his ideas for something on paper is when he reads through what he wrote and he revises it and he makes sure it's logical and sensible, because if his first draft is bound in that huge creative outpouring onto the paper, he's bound to forget to write some things down because they're coming through his head so fast, okay? So he revises that here. Then in the Ajya Saptamsa, sexually speaking, that's like the period of pregnancy. That's the long-term period of long, lengthy nourishment that's required to have the baby, okay? Takes 9 months for humans. Takes 3 years for elephants, right? Fat is required. The woman's going to gain a lot of fat to get her through those 9 months. So this is that long, sustained creative effort. In the musician, it's all the time, now that he's revised the music and he likes it, it's all the time he spends practicing the song. Okay? In the author, it's all the time he spends maybe marketing the book or revising the book, or writing the book. Maybe he just sketches out the rough draft. Now he's like filling in all the parts and finding the characters' names and developing the character's background. It's basically the point where you put your skill behind it. If it's an intellectual or artistic project, or in respect to creating real children, it's the point of growing the child. And that's the most important time, right? The 9 months that the child is in the womb is the most important time in a child's development. That's the time when most children die, is before 9 months, right? If they are born, there's a much better chance they're going to live to an adult than during the 9 months in their womb. So this is the time when you have to do everything you can to make your project work. And it's like the pregnant state, of really growing that thing into a substance that can be useful. Then in the next, the Ikshurasa Saptamsa, based on the sexual act, that's the actual birth of the child. Okay, it's the sudden birth, of the child, where the child comes out and you actually have the physical Jupiter, the physical baby. In the intellectual pursuit of someone who's writing, let's say, that's when they actually get the book. Okay, they actually have the book now. They've produced the book. They wrote it, they published it, and a truck comes to their house and drops off a boatload of books. That's this Ikshurasa thing. And now they really get some sweetness. They're like, yeah, during writing it, if you've ever written a book, the whole process is nice. It is just like this. You get to this age and you just work and get the books just right and get it ready for print. Then you send it off to print. And then when your book gets back, you're just totally high. It's total buzz. It's totally like drinking a gallon of sugarcane juice. You're just so hyper and you can't wait to open up the box of books and look at that first copy of your own book, right? Same thing with the baby. You just can't wait to see what your baby looks like. You can't wait to think of a name to name your baby. You're excited about what your baby's going to look like when it smiles. And you can't wait to change your first diaper, right? So that's a super hyper part of the Saptamsa. Okay? And it's very fulfilling, because that's when you've created it. You've got the book in hand. You're holding your baby. You're done. You've created it. Okay? Then we go on to the 6th Saptamsa, or of the odd, and second of an even, the Madhu, the honey. So this is where a real attachment to that thing starts to occur. You're holding the baby and you're clinging to it and you're stuck to it. Okay? And now your job is to make that baby into something worthwhile, right? You have to raise that kid. You have to educate that kid and continue to grow it into something useful. Okay, Jupiter just stops. You've got the kid. Now what do you do with it? The Madhu helps you see what you're going to do with it. Okay? In the writing process or the creative process, this is when you've got all your books. You got your whole house full of books. There's books under this, holding the TV up. There's books under your kitchen table. There's books in your closet. So you got your books, but it's in the Madhu that you do something with those books to start bringing in the money you need and the reputation from writing the book by selling that book and getting people to read your book, by giving lectures on your book, by doing book tours and all that kind of stuff. All those things are ruled by Venus and the Madhu Saptamsa, where you nurture that book along so you can achieve your goals. The book is not going to have any dynasty. It's not going to be part of your dynasty if you can't get it to people, if you can't get people to read it. Your child is not going to be a part of your dynasty if you just lock him in the basement, right? You have to get him out and nurture him and continue to grow him. And that's what this Madhu does, okay? Then in the Shuddha Jala, it's when you've completed your job. You've sold all your books. And now you can relax and relax. Your child moved out. He's 18 years old, and he's gone on to live. So now you get to enjoy things like, gee, somebody just emailed me and told me Vault of the Heavens is selling for $250 on Amazon. That's always worth a good laugh to me, And, where you just are relaxed about it. You just enjoy what your creations are doing out there, whether it's your book or your music or your child. That's this stage here. So this whole process is indicated by these Saptamsas. The creative process, whether of a child or a thing, something else that you're trying to create as part of your dynasty, something you want to create that you want to last, not something you're just creating because you're bored and you're just a hobbyist, but this is really what you want to create and leave behind you. That's what the Saptamsa is. It's not just, painting because you like painting and you paint and you just drop it somewhere. You want to be a great artist and you want people to respect your art in 500 years. Then look at the Saptamsa, not just for a hobbyist artist, okay? So this whole process, the Saptamsa that a planet's in shows where that planet is at in its creative process. If the planet has good Lajitadiya Avashtas, that planet's operate on that level on a healthy level. If it has bad Lajitadiya Avashtas, that planet's operating on that level on a detrimental level. So, let's say, in the Shara, we've got the creative idea just exploding out of our heads, or we've got the 20-year-old that just needs a woman more than life itself, right? He's just so full of testosterone. Well, if it's afflicted, that planet gets really corrosive and really cruel, and it might go rape somebody. It might be sexually abusive, It might not care about their partner, It might have a chronic masturbation problem. It might surf porn 24 hours a day. Or it could be so full of great ideas that it's caustic towards any other ideas, and rude and crude to everyone else who has anything to say about the subject, like your demented scientist or your evil scientist. Okay? Or the planet can be in a good Lajitadiya Avashta, which means they're full of these ideas, and the person can envision all these ideas and begin the process of putting those ideas into reality. Or the 20-year-old who knows it's time for him to find himself a woman and getting a family, so he begins looking for a worthwhile woman. He begins looking for someone he can actually live with. So again, what state is that planet in doesn't determine if it's good or bad, okay? It's the Lajitadiya Avashtas that determine if it's good or bad. Alright, in the Shira Saptamsa, if the planet's in a good Lajitadiya Avashta, that planet again is in a receptive stage. It's waiting to embrace something. It's lovesick for creativity. It doesn't know itself what to create, but it's waiting. If it's in good Lajitadiya Avashta, it recognizes when something good comes into its life that it can actually co-create with in a healthy way, and it embraces it. In a bad Lajitadiya Avashta, it's either closed off to what could truly nurture it and it could truly create with, or it's open to things that can never really fully creative with. So this could be like a woman, symbolically a woman who's open to every man, if it's in a bad Lajitadiya Avashta, but has no care about really creating anything, or is open to every man who just uses her, but runs from the man who really truly loves her. Okay? That's the quality of this. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it happens in respect to a woman or anything like that. It's just that symbology of being open to everything that's not going to work and closed to what will work, okay, to get your creative venture out. That's what an afflicted bad Lajitadiya Avashta will do in the Shira Avashta, okay? In the Dadya Saptamsa, from the point of, okay, the problems that can arise, or let's start with the good. If it's in a good Lajitadiya Avashta, the sexual act is healthy and caring and nurturing in the testosterone person, okay? Or the process of, refining the writing or fixing the song is an enjoyable process that makes the song better than conceived, okay? In the sexual act, it's just all this creative energy. The person just has to, have sex with something because they're about to explode. But with this planet in the good Dadya, it finds it's more than just getting rid of all that extra energy. It finds it's something, it gets catalyzed by the woman and finds that it's something better than they thought and more worthwhile than they thought in lots of ways. Or in the artist, the painting comes out better than envisioned. Or the music, they fix it and it's a better song. This happens all the time, like when I write, anyone writes. You write it, and then oftentimes you surprise yourself, and you go, geez, this came out better and more sensible than I expected. That's a good planet in Dadya, Saptamsa. Okay? Afflicted planets in Ajya, Saptamsa, and bad Lajitaya Vashtas. These are planets that, though they might have all the ability to go the distance or really pull their creativity off, for some reason they don't. They choose not to, or they get blocked at every turn, or they don't think it's really worthwhile enough to do. Okay? In the horoscope of someone who's actually having a physical baby child, it could be someone who simply doesn't think it's worth taking care of themselves during the pregnancy. You know, they're smoking and drinking while they're pregnant, you know, and the guy in the partnership is staying out late with his friends instead of taking care of his wife. She's working, and then she comes home and cleans, and he's out partying with his friends. You know, where you're not nurturing the pregnancy through. So there's a lack of taking care of and using your skills and abilities to really make it into something wonderful if a planet's afflicted in Ajya. If the planet's in good Lajitaya Vashta in Ajya, Saptamsa, then a person is able to do the most intelligent, sensible things and make the most of their abilities and skills to really create something wonderful. Okay? In this part of the process, which is actually having it, if the planet's in a good Saptamsa and we finally have our creation, we fall in love with our creation and we become devoted to our creation and we think we created a wonderful thing and we find happiness in having created it. So we hold the baby and we don't want to let go and we just love it right away and we can't wait to give it its name. Or we get our book, or we look at our painting, or we hear our music that we just recorded in the studio 5 minutes ago, and we go, wow, you know, I'm so happy I did this. Okay, it's a very fulfilling feeling. Or if that planet's in a bad Lajitaya Vashta, you know, you grudgingly go to the hospital to pick your wife and kids up, going, great, now I have to raise this kid, you know. Or you look at the music you created and you wad up the paper and throw it in the trash. You're just not happy with what you've created. Somehow. It seems blemished to you or undesirable. And that's really terrible to have a planet afflicted in this Saptamsa because you don't want to go through work of creating something only to be disappointed with it, right? Then in the Madhu Saptamsa, planets in good Lajitaya Vashtas are the planets you really take care of and nurture to their highest level of fulfillment, meaning that you nurture those things in such a way that both you and that thing could be the most successful and most fulfilled. Okay? If it's in a bad Lajitaya Vashta, you just don't take care of it properly over the long haul. If it's in a bad, Madhu, honey, Saptamsa, you just don't take care of it properly. You neglect it. You don't love it. You're not devoted to it. After you write your book, you have to be devoted to your book to get it out there. You got to go to the bookstores and give a little talk and go on a book tour and spam people about your book. You got to be devoted towards it. So are you devoted enough to take care of it, that you're going to stick with it and make it really into something wonderful? That's the Madhu. Okay, if it's in bad Lajitaya Vashta, you won't. Or every time you try, you'll get balked. If it's in good Lajitaya Vashta, you do. Then planets that are afflicted in the Shuddha Jala Saptamsa, those are planets those are things that on their creative level of letting them go and living their own existence, letting our creations go to take on a life of their own, we either don't want to or we can't let go of it. Okay, and we always have to mingle in it. Or we can't stand that something else would enjoy. Along the lines of a terribly afflicted Shuddha Jala. Now, I never saw this woman's chart, but I would bet everything I own that she has a seriously afflicted planet in Shuddha Jala. She lived behind me in Encinitas. And out of my apartment window, I could look down, and she had this tiny little house. It was like a studio apartment. But behind the studio apartment, she lived there for several years. She took the time to build a lovely garden. And the fence was full of creepers. We're talking a 10-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot area. And it was some of the most beautiful 10 square feet in Encinitas, where there's lots of beautiful flowers and creepers. You just walk down the streets and along the coast there, And it's just a joy to see all these wonderful flowers that everyone plants. It's really a beautiful neighborhood. Well, this woman's little patch of yard was outstanding. It was like a step above everyone. She was always out there making her garden perfect. Okay? And it was beautiful. It was always nice to walk through the alley and walk by her yard and look what was new and what was blooming. Even though it was just a tiny little garden, 10 square feet. Well, one day, she got a notice that they needed to use that building for something else. I think the owner's daughter or something needed a place to live. So, I'm not sure what the details were, but basically they said, look, we can't have you, we need the space, you can't live here anymore. So she had no choice but to move. She was really upset by that. So you know what she did? She took the whole garden, every little twig that she'd ever grown, and tore it out and threw it in the dumpster. She just blatantly murdered her creations. She was like, these are for me. So her whole creative act was not about the creation of what she was creating. It was about her. And so when she couldn't enjoy them, she decided no one else was going to enjoy them, and she murdered them. You know, she just ruined this beautiful garden that she'd worked on for several years because no one else, if she couldn't enjoy it, no one else would. That's a bad planet in the Shuddha Jala. You're not going to let go of it and let it have a life of its own. If she'd had a good shot of Bala, Shuddha Jala Saptamsa, when it was time to let go of that garden, she would have cried that she was going to miss it. She was going to miss her child, that garden that she such beautifully created. She would have left, and that child would have taken a life of its own. Someone else would have moved in and watered the plants and grown and pruned it. And that garden, 100 years later, could still be there because she created it and left it as a beautiful dynasty to Encinitas. But no, her Saturn, that Shuddha Jala, was not going to have anything to do with it. So she murdered it and killed her dynasty instead of letting it take a life of its own. So that's the difference between a good planet in Shuddha Jala and a bad planet. A bad planet, you don't let that thing take on a life of its own. And whatever you create, you have to do that. If not, you'll have agony within yourself, and you're going to destroy something that can beautify the world and everyone who sees it. I never saw this woman's chart, but like I said, I bet my life on it that she has some seriously afflicted Shuddha Jala planets. And the whole neighborhood was like horrified at this. We were all like going, oh my God, we talked about it for weeks. And every time we'd walk by her house, it was like a depressing experience that someone could just murder their children like that because they couldn't keep them anymore. That's like when your son says, all right, I finished high school, I'm going to join the Peace Corps. And you go, no, you're not, you're going to college. And they go, no, I'm going to the Peace Corps. And you go, and shoot your kid, bury him in the basement. Yeah, right, you're going to the Peace Corps. So that's a bad Shuddha Jala. So basically, you don't want your parents to have Jupiter, the 5th Lord and the 7th Lord in Shuddha Jala Saptamsas and be afflicted, because that parent is never going to let go of you, right? All right. So that gives an idea of just how profound this Saptamsa is. I mean, it's like, wow, this is just an amazing Varga. Because so much of what we do is about creating our dynasty, right? I mean, think about how much of our life revolves around creating our dynasty. The purpose of life is life. And that life is our dynasty. It's what lives after we die in the form of our children or the great things we do in the world. And if we don't leave a dynasty, what's the purpose of living here? You know what I mean? Well, the only other purpose is spiritual enlightenment. But if you're spiritually become realized, you leave a dynasty of good vibrations, right? So you know what I mean? None of us want to suffer the experience of being here and not leaving the world a better place somehow, or not having created something that's going to live after us. People who have children and find joy in what their children do have an easier time dying. When they're dying, they're more ready to go because they have their dynasty, and they die knowing that they created life that's going to continue creating and creating as long as the earth is around, unless they have some children, great-great-grandchildren that eventually have terrible Saptamsas and end it. But they have the hope of that at the least, and they have the current reality. People who don't create a dynasty have a harder time leaving, They haven't finished anything. They haven't left anything behind. So the only thing that can stay is them. They cling to life. Even when they are better passed passing on. I've also seen indications of people's, souls who don't want to move on after birth, after death, because they're still clinging too tightly to a child, for instance, that they've always controlled. And they still can't just let that child go live their life, so they haunt that child, one example is a woman who had real serious issues with her mother, really controlling mother. When her mom died, the woman started taking on the appearance of her mother. She started wearing clothes like her mother. She started changing her hair like her mother. Because her mother had invaded her astral space. Her mother had tramp-souled into her after she died. Her mother didn't leave, and this woman had to go to a psychic healer to talk to her mom and get her mom to move on out and go on up and ascend to wherever she was going to ascend to. So, it's really critical that we have this ability to let go of our creations when it's time to do that. And that's what this Shuddha Jala is. That's when the creation dies to us, Saturn, death. It's no longer part of our creative process. It's just something to take refreshment and joy in that we have succeeded and fulfilled in it. And then we deserve a glass of fresh, pure water because we've done the hard work, and nothing refreshes us after hard work than a big glass of fresh, cool water, right? And so this is the Shuddha Jala Saptamsa. So anyway, Saptamsas are amazing. I could probably talk another couple hours, but we'll talk more in the next video. So I hope you can get an idea of how much you can look at. Oh yeah, the point I was trying to make is so much of our life are about, our dynasty, what we're going to leave behind. Are we going to be successful in that or not? And therefore, are we going to be able to leave feeling contented in what we did? Are we going to die drinking fresh water, being refreshed and ready to go, ready for the new thing, refreshed and ready for the new level of existence? Or are we going to feel like we didn't leave something behind that we wanted to, or everything we left behind is not what we wanted, and die a bitter old person, you know what I mean? So this is a very important Varga for that. And again, the 7th house is the house of death. Okay, it's the house you vacate through. In the horoscope, you're born through the Lagna and you leave through the 7th. The 8th house is not so much the house of death, it's the house of longevity. And when your longevity runs out, you die. And the thing that makes your longevity run out more than anything else is the 7th house. Okay? So, enjoy these. We'll have another class on the important grahas and bhavas, which are also extremely revealing about this Varga. But it's really one of the most profound Vargas, because it does address such an important area of life. And regretfully, it's one of those Vargas that there's just nothing on in the old books hardly. It's like, it's something that's sort of ignored, But again, most Vargas are ignored in the old books, unfortunately. Old books are mostly just yogas based on the Rashi chart, every once in a while dipping into 1 or 2 or maybe 3 other Vargas for something. So this is serious Vedic astrology with Vedic principles of the different substances that have the creative vital energy within them, which symbolize the creative process of where our planet's in the sign. Okay, thank you.